Okay. We're, okay, guys, we should be live. Welcome to our Hangout on Air, a lawyer's guide to starting out on G+. My name is Will Eady. I'm an Ohio trial attorney in Cleveland, Ohio at the Spangenberg Law Firm. We have some great guests with us today. We have Tina Willis, is a Florida trial attorney at Tina Willis Law. She's gained thousands of followers on Google+. She's been a great mentor to many people, and she runs a regular show, Legally Speaking, along with Stephan Futeral. We have Guy, and Guy, tell me how to say your last name correctly.
It's Sakalakis, but close enough is good enough.
Okay, Sakalakis runs Attorney Sync. He's an SEO and online marketing guru and student of marketing, business, philosophy, law, politics, and football. And he's recently been featured on AVO webinar that was well reviewed. We also have Stacy Burke, who is a Texas trial attorney who launched a nationwide law firm consulting practice a year ago. She focuses on projects including database implementation and cleanup, nationwide television marketing and intake, and dealing with social media, and is a G+ presence as well. And today we're going to focus really on the basics of Google+ for folks who either just created an account or have an account, have maybe played around a little bit, but want to understand from other attorneys how they can utilize Google+ for networking, to grow their practice, and for marketing. So we're going to cover a few topics. I'm going to tend to lead off with a very basic understanding and then hand it off to the panel to discuss. What I would suggest for everyone, two things. One, it's great to take notes. It's great to try to get everything down. There's always more to learn, so if you get the broad strokes here, that's a good place to begin. And this presentation will be available on YouTube afterwards. You can come back to this event page to find out where and rewatch it or share it if you'd like to drill down on something that you haven't mastered just from the presentation. And then for everyone who's new, I know we invited a lot of people who are new to Google+ and even signed up for Google+ for this event. Down below the box, if you're on the event page, it says say something with your picture next to it. That's a comment stream. You can use that comment stream to ask questions, and we'll try to pop in and out of that and address some of those questions. So that's a great point to introduce yourself, to see other people who are in the show while you're watching. So without further ado, I'd like to start off with kind of the what's that question I hear from a lot of people about Google+, this whole idea of circles. So just briefly, and I'm an attorney and I'm relatively new at Google+, so I'm speaking from your perspective, and then we'll hand it off to the experts. Circles, what's unique about Google+ Circles is, unlike Facebook where you have a two-way friendship and acceptance request, or unlike LinkedIn where you have that same ask for a connection and then confirm, or Twitter where you just one-way follow people and they can follow you back. In Google+, it's more of the Twitter style where you can circle, quote-unquote, or follow anyone you like. They can decide to follow you back and reciprocate by circling you, or they cannot do that. And so a circle is just a funny way of saying a list of people you're following, and then within that concept of circling, you can divide that up into as many subsets as you want. So you can have a subset. I think Google starts you off with things like family and acquaintances. You could add a circle for social media. You could add a circle for lawyers, Ohio lawyers, Pennsylvania lawyers, whatever you wanted, and go from there. So it's a little bit overwhelming. My mistake, square one, was trying to circle everyone in an individual, circle. It was very, very, very specific. I ended up with 50 circles and not very manageable. So we're going to pass it off. I'd like to start with Tina, if we can, as somebody who has grown her circles dramatically. I think you're over 8,000 followers at this point.
I don't know exactly. Yeah, it's over 8,000. I mean, I certainly remember when I was excited about reaching 1,000. So, but if you just engage and interact with people, it's pretty easy to get people to follow you back. Initially, that was my goal, was to get, just to raise my numbers, and the primary purpose was so that Google would think that my website should rank higher than somebody who has less followers. But over time, it's become more than that to me in terms of my involvement with Google+. But yeah, so.
And how do you manage those so when someone's starting off square one, if they knew what you know now, how should they start off going about finding people to circle, creating circles? What is the square one for attorneys starting off on Google+?
Yeah, I've been trying to think back to exactly what I did in the very beginning. One thing I know that I did was go to relevant lawyer communities. There are a whole bunch of them, but some of them have virtually no real engagement and activity going on, and others have a lot more. I started on the Lawyers on Google Plus community, which is the largest one, run by Preston Clark. I know Stacy and Guy are, is that how you pronounce your name? Sorry. Yeah. But I know they're also very active in that community. So you just go there and you read posts and comment on any that interest you. And you can also obviously share your own post. But the Lawyers on Google Plus community, well, that's where I started, and then from there you kind of start to learn about circles. I don't know that I could say exactly. I'm still working on how to manage my circles, frankly, but I would say start out certainly with an attorney circle, or if it's in your practice area, you can have maybe two. I have a few. I do have them geographic. I have a focus on Florida and things like that, but. You definitely, you also can add random circles. There are pros and cons to that and lots of debates about whether you should do that, but it's a way to add people to your list. A good thing to do is to add lawyer circles, which you can find around. But, the main thing I would say is, like, the people who are on this panel, if you follow us, but, you're going to see the people we're interacting with, and those are some of the most engaging lawyers on Google+, and from there you can kind of span out. And one thing I would also say is that Google+ is similar to Twitter and different than Facebook in the sense that you follow strangers, and that's welcome and that's fine, and it's a way to connect and network with other, in our case, lawyers and people who might be interested in the law. And so mainly starting from those communities, we also have just started a community plus attorneys and friends, which I'm committed to engaging right there in that community. But there are, like I said, there are a lot of them. Some of them you'll see link dropping where there's just no discussion going on, and I kind of avoid those. But yeah, so circles you kind of learn as you go. It's like you said, you're still learning. I'm still learning. And I don't know that anyone has perfected circles, but... So
just to tie it back before we hand it off, we're talking about circling and communities and all of that. When you hover over, so if you look below the video feed where there's the comments feed, and I just posted a link there for attorneys on Google+, if you hover over my name, you'll see a little pop-up window that has my profile picture, or if you hover over, Richard Lord is below that. You'll see a little pop-up screen, and then you'll see something that says follow or circle. If you hover over that or click on that, you'll see your circles, quote-unquote, and you can add or remove someone from a circle. And what that means is those people then will, on your home screen, those people's posts will show up like a Facebook feed or a Twitter feed. And so what Tina's been pointing out is that community Lawyers on Google Plus is a community, is just a set-aside feed just for people who've joined a particular community. And so when you go there and post there, it shows up for the other people in the community, and you can see what they're posting in the community, and you can hover over them or click on the people and say, gee, I want to follow that person. They post great content, and people will start following you the same way. Let's hand the ball off. Stacy, do you want to give a little background if you have any tips or tricks on kind of how you've approached circling?
Sure. I would say on a very basic level that lawyers use the different types of social media channels based on their own set of preferences. And so you may expand your reach by being present, if you're able to manage it, across all of these channels, meaning that I have connected with people on Google Plus who I have not connected with on Twitter, which I've been very active on and have a big following on for a number of years. I use circles. I definitely have a lawyer's circle. I've definitely done some audience building type of private circles. It's a big part of engaging on Google Plus is to make sure that you have a lot of people that you are engaging with on a regular basis. That's what sort of gives you authority and credibility with Google, and that improves your authorship and author rank and all of these exciting things we'll talk about later. One circle that I do recommend is what I call a competitive landscape analysis circle. So if you know who your top 10 competitors are, either in a practice area or in a particular market, put them in a circle, and then you can monitor in real time what they're sharing on this network and see who all is following them and who they're connected to. And then you can sort of, I always say, take what they're doing and do it better.
That's a great idea. And just to tie on to that, I think that's a great point. You got to do what works for you, and to Tina's point as well, you'll grow with that process as you learn. Great idea. I hadn't thought of that, of putting the competitors in a circle you can check and kind of keep tabs on what they're doing, particularly geographically. I would add, one of the nice things about Google Plus is it's a national platform. So if you're working relatively locally or within a state and you're not really competing on the national landscape necessarily, it's a great way to also have colleagues who do the same type of work you do, but not necessarily direct competitors. Mm-hmm. Guy, do you have anything to add about circles from your background?
Sure. So I basically what I do is that I circle people based on, maybe it's how we met, perhaps it's an event that we all go to. Usually when I'm meeting new people, I'll kind of throw them in my catch-all following circle and then start to segment them as I start to get to know them better. So, maybe it's, we're an agency, so other agency partners, maybe it's lawyers I meet at a trial lawyers association, that kind of thing. But, it's funny, the Google Plus, briefly when they were doing some of their YouTube advertising, they kind of talked about how you might move people through different circles, and it kind of relates to the relationships. If you think of a circle, you might have a family circle, you might have circle for people that you work with at the office. It's really the types, the point of the circling is that you're going to be able to share content with that group of people that are going to be interested in that, versus something that would be more general, like sharing with the public, is much more similar to a Twitter, where you're kind of putting it out into the ether. With the circles, you're actually, you want to share content that would be relevant to those people that would be interested in that content based on your affiliation with those people. That's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, that's a great point. And so bringing this back kind of full circle, no pun intended, when I started, I had, I had a Cleveland, I had a lawyer, I had a Cleveland lawyer, I had all kinds of little breakdowns. I had engineers and experts, and I broke experts down. I mean, that was maybe an OCD way to do it that some lawyers might start doing. I would just suggest, and particularly to Guy's point and Google Plus's point about moving people through circles, one piece of advice I got relatively early on that I've been trying to develop is having tiers of engagement. And what engagement, and you heard the panel talking about engagement. Engagement is clicking +1 on somebody. Engagement is, and I don't know why my camera's on, sorry about that. Engagement is sharing and resharing posts, and so doing that is a great way to have people circle you. So, and to find people back. Let's kind of go.
Can I add? You want me to add something? One thing to what he was just saying. He uses circles in terms of what he's going to share, and to me, that is just too complicated. I share almost everything publicly. Every once in a while I'll share something to a specific circle, and there are people who think that's horrible. And many people do share publicly. For one thing, if you share only to a circle, someone can only reshare it to a certain extent. They can't reshare it publicly, and so it hampers someone's ability to reshare. But what I use circles for, and I'm kind of like you, I started out more OCD, and then I just got into, basically the regulars. I have like a regular reading circle, and then it kind of goes out into some other circles. But I think staying broader is better. But you use it, it's not only for sharing purposes. My point was it's for reading. So if you can click on that particular circle and just read their feed. So if there are a handful of people you definitely want to keep an eye on, and you can turn the notifications on or off. so that if you have them on, every time they share something, you're going to get a little red notification, which, you know, can become overwhelming in itself. But anyway, that's how I use circles. It's just to see, you know, which circles I'm going to read more often and less often, because I share everything publicly. So I just wanted to say that, you know, there are lots of different ways to utilize Google+, and you'll learn as you go what works best for you. And it doesn't take long to learn. I mean, a few days or a few weeks of, you know, doing a little bit of time here and there, and all attorneys will figure out what's going on. So.
Yeah, and that sharing or reading approach, I take that approach now with those circles of, I'll have a tier one are people I want to see everything they post. There's only a handful of people on it. Folks like the panelists today are in that kind of circle. I want to read everything they post. And then I'll have a tier 2 and a tier 3. A tier 2 are people I engage with. I like their content. They've kind of stood out or engaged with me. And then tier 3 is similar to Guy's generic follower, where they're folks that I came across for one reason or another and want to see what they have to offer, and maybe they'll get bumped up or down. And that's not a value judgment on my part. That's just, there's only so, you know, when you have 1,000 people circled, you can't keep up with that feed necessarily unless you're on a lot of the time. And at least in my experience, attorneys are pretty busy with other things. So that's one way to manage that. Let's move on to communities. We've touched on that a little bit. I've posted a couple of the communities we've talked about. Preston Clark's Lawyers on Google Plus is the largest lawyer-focused community. And one way you find these communities, when you go up to the search bar at the top, it looks just like Google. You type in lawyers, type in injury lawyer, type in whatever you want, and you'll see results that include a bunch of people who identify themselves as lawyers, but also communities who identify as lawyers. There's personal injury lawyers, there's plus attorneys and friends, there's a whole bunch of them, and a lot of them that have good engagement are really worthwhile. Can you guys, I know we've touched on those, and we might not spend a ton of time on communities since we've kind of hit that. What are some communities people might want to seek out, and what are some of the basics for etiquette in the community? What should they do and not do, kind of your 1 or 2 top item takeaway? And maybe we'll start with Stacy, move down the line that way.
Okay, sure. I, like Tina said about how she shares, I generally share everything publicly that I post. When I want to reach an additional target audience that may not be already connected to me, go into like a personal injury lawyers or lawyers on Google Plus or direct marketing or guerrilla marketing for lawyers. There are a lot of legal marketing communities on Google Plus, and I'll go in and find, you know, the direct mail piece. If I've written a blog post about direct mailing for law firms, that's where I'm going to want to share it, because it'll be the most interesting to them and get the most interaction really once it's shared in that community. But I share everything publicly as well. So, I mean, the law firm social media community, personal injury lawyers, lawyers on G+, and B2B digital marketers, those are the ones that I use the most.
And let me, before we go on to Guy, ask you, and I'll ask everybody, there is a setting in Google Plus where you can decide whether your community posts, so when you go on to say Lawyers on Google Plus or G+, and post something there, whether that shows up on your home feed or not. Do you have a preference one way or another, whether everything is displayed publicly even when it's a community, or do you keep that private and post in both
I've done
community
both.
and publicly?
I've done both.
And what do you suggest for people starting off?
I think it's pretty complicated to mess with a lot of settings when you're just starting off, and I think just publicly sharing, only connecting with people that you want to see your content, and publicly sharing that content on your own page, and maybe in 1 or 2 communities that you know are only open to, say, plaintiffs' lawyers, if that's the community that you feel comfortable putting your content out in, is the best way to approach it.
Okay, Guy.
Go limit it at first.
Yeah. Guy, same question, and then if you can give some pointers on community posting and etiquette.
Yeah, so I generally tend to do both depending on what I'm sharing. I think the communities are a really great way to get active in Google Plus, because, you know, when you're just, and I think you should post things publicly, especially for when you're trying to disseminate posts and get to know new people. The real, as Tina was saying, some of these groups are really good for engagement, and so developing relationships through the communities is really strong. And there are really some really great communities. There's some that have been mentioned for lawyers, but also folks who are interested in learning things about Google Analytics. There's a lot of great search communities. A lot of the early adopters have tended to gravitate towards Google+, and so there's a lot of good people that really know this stuff on Google+, even more so than other social networks, in my opinion. But I would spend time in communities. I think finding communities you're interested in, even creating and hosting communities is a really good thing to do to get familiar with Google+. But I think sharing publicly, sharing in the community, do both, get to know people. But I think one thing that's just like a general etiquette thing is it's not just about like, hey, here's the last blog post I wrote, and everything that you post is just the last blog post you wrote. Spend time commenting, read what other people are writing. Not everything has to even be a link, right? I mean, the one thing that's different than like Twitter is that the character buffer is a lot longer. So long-form posts on Google+ and communities are great. It's almost a blogging platform in some ways. And there are things you can do to add, formatting like bold and underline and italics. There's a lot of good handy guides on that stuff. Putting YouTube videos into your Google+ postings, that thing, just in general, the more that you're contributing to the community in terms of conversation versus just dropping links, I think that's an important thing for folks to remember.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I'll say, depending on the most valuable communities are the ones where you learn the most and people engage the most, and those tend to be very heavily moderated. And so what you see on lawyers on G+, you see it on Lawyers in Law, you see moderation. So that means if someone's watching what people are posting, and if all you do is stick a link on and leave, then that can be removed, or you can be banned from the community. And I wouldn't say anyone's out there with a sledgehammer waiting to knock people down for dropping a link, but it's just like walking into a party and saying, hey, I got a great settlement, and then walking out the door. I mean, people are going to think you're a jerk. If you stick around, and I think people are alluding to this, and +1 other people's posts you like, comment on those posts, reshare them if you think it's worth resharing before you even post on your own, and then maybe do a 2-to-1 ratio of engagement. It doesn't take but a few minutes. It's just like scrolling through a news feed, and it really creates good communities, and I've learned a lot on some of those communities. Tina, what are some of your takeaways for community engagement? And Tina, you run a community, correct?
Yeah, actually quite a few. When I first started, I created several different communities based on my interest, and at that time, no one was following me, so it does no good whatsoever to create the community, pretty much. But and you can't then delete communities, which is strange. But at least as far as I'm aware, you can't. You can step down as the owner, but you can't get rid of them. So some of these are just hanging out there, but I've committed to a few of them, and one that we like is Plus Attorneys and Friends, which we're committed to now, and Attorney SEO we like also. I just like it because Don Peterson, actually, an attorney in Orlando, has been posting some great stuff in there, and I enjoy it. But in terms of the link dropping, I had written down 2 or 3 huge pet peeves, and it's not personal. It's just there are things that I feel just most attorneys are doing wrong on Google+. Not most, but many. And I'm not even sure it's the actual attorneys doing this. In some cases, in some cases I know it is not the attorneys. It's someone working for them, and actually I feel they're working against them. But the link dropping, like you said, there's not a sledgehammer, but there actually kind of is somewhat of a, let me just say this from having owned these few communities and trying to grow them. If you do not delete link dropping type posts, and what that means is you just literally post a link with little or no comments, and then you, even worse than that, when people comment and engage with you, you say nothing back. It's like, why am I bothering to talk to you? And the problem is that as a community owner, if you leave those up, you'll develop what's called a link graveyard. And in the law, it happens pretty quickly to where there are 10 or 20 or 50 posts that are all just links, and there are no comments, and someone new goes there and says, oh, this is a dead community. And so they, immediately leave, and no engagement ever happens. And so if you're not diligent about deleting those type posts, then that's what you'll end up with. And what I would say is the link dropping. What lawyers a lot of times do is they develop their little circle. They get to know a few people, and then they each reshare links that are empty, and they don't comment and engage a lot. Some do, and some are great. Like everyone on this panel is great in that way. But I think that's the only way to develop real connections that feel like they're real. You have to put some time into it. And so that would mean primarily comments. Like I'm just reading through a great book right now on semantic search, and David Amerlin, who's very active, and he's a great guy on Google+, and he says that comments when sharing, he believes are the most valuable from a search engine perspective, and I believe lawyers need to do more of that and less just +1ing all the way down, which you'll get. Another thing that people like to do, like I talked to a guy who has, like, his circles are reciprocator levels, reciprocator level 1, and just, this may be a little too advanced for this show, but pure reciprocation, I think, is a really bad way to go on Google+, not just because it doesn't develop natural relationships, but I don't think it helps in search, because if someone +1s everything on your page and then you go back and do the same, Google can see that, there's no filter for you. You're so generous with your +1s that everyone gets one. So how much does your vote really count? So I think people need to be judicious about +1s and share. I mean, liberal to an extent. I +1 anything that looks good, but I'm not going to +1 everything, and I'm not going to share everything. And I do try to comment and engage. And I wish more lawyers, would take the time to do that. So, I think that's starting out by commenting with people, whoever you'll see pretty quickly which lawyers are active on Google+. Active to the extent of also commenting, because I consider people who are just sharing and +1, frankly, not to be active on Google+. I mean, that's my view of, so I mean, not to be. I mean, if there are people who have +1 like so much of my stuff and never have said one word to me. I don't, I have no idea who they if they exist, Yeah. So.
Well, let me jump on that, just because I think that's a great point. And what we'll see, and you can see it pretty quickly, folks who hire somebody who's a marketer and say, get me on Google+ and make me a presence on Google+. And on some level, what you're missing when you do that isn't just the great results on semantic search and the new generation of search that really isn't about just random links and +1s. And I posted on the comments a link to David Amerlin's profile, who's a great person to follow that Tina mentioned. But more than that, Google+ is something, at least I found, that is very useful for attorneys to actually engage on as people. And so creating your profile as an attorney and engaging with real attorneys the way you would at a conference, the way you would on a listserv, and creating some of those relationships. You really miss that if you just hand the reins over to somebody who just does marketing. And that's not to say you shouldn't have somebody doing your marketing with you and in conjunction, but and I hope we have some marketing folks watching, and these folks on the panel are great marketers. But it just means this is the opportunity where you can very easily, as an attorney, jump into a technologically very futuristic thing and in short order really get a hold of, okay, I get it. I see an article I like, I can go post it in this community or publicly, and people will engage and respond to it, and I can respond and engage with them. And before you know it, it becomes actually useful for you beyond even just the search. And so, Tina, we had this debate before. What is your preference about whether you click that box that says show everything I post in a community onto my main public profile, or do you keep those separate?
Well, like the rest of the panelists, I've gone back and forth, and sometimes it depends on what I've most recently posted in communities. The thing is that you don't want to spam your feed, or I don't want to. So if I was going to post this, if you're going to post in several communities the same, like blog posts, then you might not want that to show. But What I've recently discovered is that you can go, if you have them right now, here's what I have. It's set publicly. Everything I post in community or post publicly shows up in my feed. But you can go into each individual community and select whether you want that one shown in your feed. And I think that's a new option, because I didn't see. Yeah, and that's great, because like I'm involved in a fitness community. And I don't really want, my page is linked to my website and stuff, and I don't really want potential clients or, seeing what I ate for breakfast or whatever. I mean, sometimes I do, because I can be a little quirky, but I don't want my daily run, for example, in there. Or if you had a tech question and you went into a tech community, which you can do, you could select for that community post not to show in your feed. And I think that is great. So that means you can literally drill it down and tailor it to the specific community, and in which case then show them publicly in your feed on the settings, and then with each individual community you go and select that, any that you want to not show in your feed. So that's what I'm doing right now. So.
Well, that's terrific. I didn't know that, and see, you learn something every day, and that's why I associate with people like these panelists and Tina. I started off by not showing community posts onto my feed because I was worried. I was trying to be everything to everybody, and I wanted my public feed to be what people will find on Google who might be clients, who might be opposing counsel, and then I shared specific legal things and made comments that that I didn't feel like I had to censor in any way on communities. And what I realized was that made me much less active publicly, and I decided, I feel comfortable on Google Plus, expressing opinions on Google Plus, and I opted to be public on the posts so that people can see that I'm active on Google Plus, and that all ties into things like showing up on Google authorship. And now that I know you can be very specific about which communities, I'm in some communities that probably aren't that relevant for people who generally follow me. I'm trying to learn. It's not something I'm an expert in, and that's another thing Google Plus is great about. If you want to groom dogs or learn SEO or what have you, there's somebody who started a community that's really good at showing that. So I'm going to look into doing that. And that kind of transitions us to posting. We've talked a lot about engaging and commenting and sharing prior to link dropping. Let's take a look at actual sharing. So what I want to do, I'm going to show my screen and see if we can get this working. So what you should be seeing now is my screen. And when I was preparing for this Hangout, I was doing some research, and I came across this article on setting up HOAs or Hangouts, Hangouts on Air by Ray Peltz, and I found it really interesting. And so if I wanted to share this like any article, I would grab the link to whatever it is. I would go to either publicly or a community, and you have this Share What's New box at the top. And posting is as simple as clicking on that Share What's New, and it knows it's me because I'm logged in. I click on link. I paste in that link, pretty straightforward, and Google's automatically going to say, oh, I'm going to pull this good picture, I'm going to pull a title, and put that all in there, which is nice. You have this option if you hover over the picture to switch between images on the page, particularly if you're on a news site or a blog that is not very technically savvy about sharing images. It might pull up a generic logo or a picture from an ad, which is kind of silly, so you can switch this to the picture from the post, or you can decide I don't want to show an image at all, and then you're going to type in a message. And when they talk about engaging, that's really what they mean is not just hitting share right now, but actually adding your own commentary. So for me, this is something that that is really handy to. This article is a really handy way to learn about sharing and starting Hangouts and making events and marketing. So I would type in something to that effect and add a hashtag or two we'll talk about. And then because this is a community, I'm looking at Lawyers on G+. I have the option of putting it in different categories within the community. And I'd scroll down and put this probably under social media, or I'd put it under the business of law, because frankly Hangouts can be about business. And then I'd scroll down. Oops, that's too far. I'd scroll down and hit share, and then with my message up here, it would show up on Lawyers on Google+. And I'm going to cancel that so I can write a more in-depth message before I share, but I want to show an example post Preston Clark just put up in that, that someone's looking for an attorney And so that's the kind of thing where, you know, someone's looking for an attorney of a particular type in New York, and here's an opportunity to get folks around the nation who can say, gee, I have an idea for who might do that, or you see news feeds, things like that. So these are all posts people put up in this community, and if they have the settings set up to show it online, it'll also show it online. So that's a real brief preview of posting. You know, there are, and Guy, you talked about this, and we'll lead off with you on posting, ways you can format this that'll make it easier for people to read your content, and to also have things like titles on your posts. So Guy, can you start off with just your top advice or pet peeves, do's and don'ts, what have you, on posting content on Google+?
Sure. So start with formatting. With formatting, and you can literally look for like Google Plus formatting guides. There's all sorts of information, but the basics are if you want to do bolding, you put the asterisks around what you want bolded, and that will make it pop off the page. You can do underscore, will make it italicized. One thing that I think is important to think about too, especially when you're sharing the content of others, you know, if you see a great post, you know, give them attribution. So same thing you talk about on Twitter, you know, doing the plus in the person's name that will populate their name next to the post. One, it's just a good practice for giving the author that attribution, but two is that it also is going to notify that author that, oh, hey, you shared their content. It might pull them into the conversation. So, you know, and the panelists and the folks in the communities you talk about do a really nice job of this, is that you're really drawing the people who are publishing the content to have conversations about the content. But in order for them to know that you're sharing it, you have to, it helps to add them as a, you know, plus their name, and that way that they can see, they get notified that you shared it, and you know, it's an endorsement for them as well. So that, I think that attribution is an important thing. I think that's true across all social networks. LinkedIn's getting a little better with it. Twitter, obviously, you can do the @ and the handle when you share someone's post. But it's a really good way to start to meet new people, especially when talking about journalists. They take that very seriously. But it's a great way to start having conversations, get journalists to you know, pay more attention to this kind of stuff that you're doing, and be involved with your communities and your groups as well.
That's great. Tina, do you want to pick up with your thoughts on posting do's and don'ts?
Well, Guy has covered so much of it, and so did you. You did a great job showing, and I would just reiterate that when you clicked that button and it said share what's new after you added the link dropping specifically would be writing nothing there, or writing interesting post or something like that, and then hitting share. That's a link dropping exercise, and I think that's pretty well frowned upon by people who are actually, you know, active. But yeah, writing, I mean, typically writing a title, like your title might be, you know, Hangouts on Air for Lawyers taken to the next level, or something like that, and bolded, and then, you know, you write a little bit, maybe a paragraph. I agree with Guy to plus mention the person whose post you're sharing, if you're, see, you can either share a link like you did, which is just from the internet somewhere, or you can share somebody else's post. Like on any one of those posts that when you went down, like Preston Clark's post looking for a lawyer in New York, there's a button or an icon that is a little swish arrow that you hit that, and that would allow you to share it publicly or into another community. And so if you're sharing his, you would then do the plus sign and start typing Preston Clark. I will say that if you start typing someone's name, sometimes it doesn't auto-populate, and typically I've found that's if they're not in your circles. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but and a way to solve that is by adding them to your circles. But or at least that's the solution I've found. If you want to add them, and then you can plus mention them, and then go about your business. So of commenting on whatever you want to say, and then hit share, and now it's in your public feed. And I would say also that in the communities, I've been drawn to people who are regular posters, but I'll talk to anyone. You know, if someone starts engaging with me and plus mentioning me, I'm going to go, and assuming I'm not like I have been kind of away for the last week a little bit, but when I'm typically very active and I read all of my notifications, but you'll focus more on people who are more regular. So the only thing that takes is just to show up, you know, just keep showing up, basically. But just, I would say when you first share something, like if you're brand new on Google Plus and you share something publicly, my husband did this. He shared a few things, and he didn't understand why I'm getting all these comments and he gets nothing, like nothing's happening. And that's because you have to reach out first. So you have to go into the communities and, you know, get other people to know you by commenting somewhat regularly. You know, not forever, but for a few weeks or so. You know, it helps. And then, you know, and maybe plus mention them when you do share something. That way they'll definitely see it. Because, you know, I'm not just randomly probably going to read, you know, an attorney who just joined yesterday who I've never heard of. I'm not looking at his page. I mean, if he posts in the community, I'll see it. But if he just posts publicly, you know, I have no idea that happened. So, you know, but...
Yeah. I think that's a great point, and I neglected, I think maybe skipping through that post. So to go to Tina's point about not being the person who just link spams, you know, you would put in, and this is Guy pointed out, you put in these asterisks to be bold at the top. It kind of creates a title, and then I'm going to put in a message that's, and people I think have problems when they're starting out, or they feel like, what am I supposed to say? You just have to be yourself. What do you like about this? I liked that this article was for beginners. I like that this was something anyone could find very accessible. I can go down and put it in the correct topic. And then to everyone's point, I think, thought this was so important. You know, I go back to my article, who wrote this? Ray Hiltz. Hopefully that's how you say it, Ray, I'm sorry. And then I hit the plus sign. This is Google Plus, so Twitter's an @ sign, Facebook uses @ signs, everyone uses hashtags, but for people on Google Plus, you use a plus. And then I started typing his name, and he's somebody I followed. You know, I put him in already as someone I wanted to follow, and I just say, for me, I'd say something like by or from or whatever. And then he's going to get a ping about this, so that, and a ping, just a little notification in the corner, like I have a notification right here. It says 1 unread message. I would get a little red 1 or 2 if someone put my name in somewhere. And then I'm going to share that so people can see this. And what you see, what pops up, is the bold title, quote-unquote title, is just part of the text, but I bolded it. A little blurb, shout out to Ray, so people can find him later and connect with him, and then that link. And then down here, when we talk about engaging, and the panelists have really hit on that, you've got +1. Don't +1 your own post, probably. It's a little obvious. And then you can reshare as this little outward arrow, or you can click the comment. And so if you see someone else's post and you like it, +1 it, but even go further, like the folks were saying, and Tina was saying, and comment on it. And if your question is, well, what do I say here? Well, if you read the article enough and you want to comment on it, just say whatever you're thinking about it. It doesn't have to be a book. It doesn't have to be an opus. It just has to be, you know, great article, thanks for sharing, I learned XYZ, whatever is a great way to do that. So I want to move on to, that was kind of how you share. You know, I put in a topic on hashtags. I don't think we have to necessarily spend a ton of time on hashtags. I know we want to get some of the other some of the other topics covered. What I would suggest about hashtags, and then if everyone wants to chime in on kind of whatever your top comment is about hashtags, hashtags are the most confusing to people, I think, who aren't used to them, because they think they're a real thing. And so let me just demystify that a little bit. Hashtags are not real. Hashtags are just social media platforms saying, if you stick a hashtag or # or whatever you call it in front of a word, we will make that into a link. We being Google Plus or Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook. And then if someone clicks on that link, we will try to present to them information and posts that relate to whatever that hashtag word was. So it's not, you're not creating, quote unquote, a hashtag that has to have some prior meaning. And so I think when you deal with people who are really just being social online, they might come up with witty, you know, sarcastic hashtags like, what do you say now, as all one collapsed word. Well, no one might search that. No one might ever care about that. It's just a way of kind of being funny. But if you hashtag something like personal injury, or you hashtag something like business litigation, or you hashtag something like breach of contract, other people who are posting about those things, who search for them, now your post is essentially, you're telling Google, hey, this is about business litigation, or this is about personal injury, or this is about social media, because I put a hashtag in front of and collapsed all the words into one, whatever that topic is. And that's a way you can also search for things. You can go back to your post and click on that hashtag and see what Google presents to you, what Google thinks is related to that hashtag. So that's, in a sense, all hashtags are, is that company coming and saying, we're going to create a link out of this. And Twitter's the one who came up with it. There's a debate at Twitter about who came up with it, but in any event, it's caught on in every other social network. I'm pretty sure LinkedIn, but I know all the others. So don't be mystified by it. Click on it if you see one that's interesting, if you want to see what other people are saying it, and start working it in. And I would suggest selecting a hashtag or two that relates to you or your practice that you can use when appropriate at the end of articles to kind of create a brand around that hashtag. And you can work with marketing folks to come up with that, or you can just improvise. So it's not that complicated. It's not mystical, even though there are books written just about hashtags. So I think we're on starting with Guy. Am I right?
Sure. So I thought you hit it pretty well. You know, again, the hashtag is really just, it's for people that are familiar with blogging. It's really similar to just a tag, you know, on a blog platform. It creates a link to the relevant content that's been assigned that tag. One thing to keep in mind is that certain hashtags have become popular, and people actually will tend to follow hashtags. You know, this is especially true on Twitter, to some extent on Google Plus as well. But you know, if you have a hashtag for a chat, like the regular kind of meeting that you do on a social network, you hit it with the hashtag, and then you can see all the posts that come up under that hashtag. So it's a good way to be able to track the conversation that a lot of people might be participating in. So you know, again, you're just seeing posts that contain the hashtag. It kind of helps sort. It's good for surfacing information, good for searching. So yeah, I think that you covered it pretty well. I think if you just think about it in terms of, it's a way to catalog related type posts. One thing that's just a pet peeve of mine is don't go nuts with the hashtags. Sometimes people will have like 80 hashtags, and their whole post will just be hashtags, and it just looks like noise. You know, it's okay to use a couple in there, especially if they relate to different subjects, but just be careful. To me, you don't want to overdo the hashtag usage.
That's a great point, and if you think about it from the audience perspective, you wouldn't think that's good content, and that's a good rule of thumb, is what would you think is good content? You'd scroll right by someone who just hashtags all day, and it can break up the content as well, so that's a great point. Tina, any thoughts on hashtags?
Yeah, I would just add on to what Guy was saying that, I mean, you both have explained them very well, but the one thing I would add to his point, that you don't just put hashtags everywhere, is that not only the number, in my view, not only the number matters, but that you keep it relatively reasonable. You know, I think 3 is a good rule of thumb. Google will automatically add them if you don't, and I think Google adds 3. But they do not have to be inside the sentence. That is no greater value to you than putting them where they fit more and look, you know, like better writing at the very end. A lot of people write, you know, great hashtag personal injury attorney, hashtag Florida, hashtag, you know, and that's all in the sentence, and it looks messy, and it's not necessary. I don't know why someone somewhere decided or told someone that that was necessary, but, you know, like you were pointing out, it's a link. So if someone were to search for that particular hashtag, they're going to be brought to your post, whether it's at the end of the post or it's right in the sentence, and it looks much better if you add it at the end. So, you know, that's my only thought on hashtag. That's something a lot of attorneys, again, not a lot, but, you know, some, and again, I don't even know if these are attorneys. Oftentimes I wonder if it's just someone posting for them, but, you know, and we had a discussion, a group of us had a discussion on a post about hashtags, and we brought in some SEO guys who said, no, there's no value to adding them inside the sentence. So But and another thing is that with hashtags, there are some popular ones that show to the right of I forget where it is. In various places on Google Plus, you can see popular hashtags. Like one of those popular is Catterday, or like if it's a holiday, Christmas, Easter, or whatever, you can hashtag that, and then people will do searches. Like I was interested in Christmas trees around Christmas. You know, I don't know why. I wanted to find pictures of Christmas trees one day. And I clicked on that hashtag and all these photos of Christmas trees, and they had hashtagged. Well, you can actually link that to your marketing because, like, you can have a Catterday, which is Saturday. People post photos of their cats, or some people do. Some people hate it. But you can use Catterday to sort of incorporate your message, really, if you want to. So you can drop, there are people who will look at all Catterday posts or all Christmas posts, and you know, you can sort of mix in your message, like how to be safe during Christmas and avoid injuries. You know, I don't really do that so much, but if you really want to go gung-ho, you can utilize the hashtags in that way. So
yeah, that's great. And just to kind of tie it back to the basics for people when you're learning how to post, we have this idea of putting a title on bold at the top. That's optional, and then putting some content, some meaningful content for whatever you're sharing, whether it's a link or an image or not at all. And then Tina's suggestion, saving your hashtags by and large to put below that, very much like as Guy pointed out, if you read blogs, they have those topics or tags at the bottom. Is a clean way to write that people will engage with. And really, unless you're trying to be aggressive, pushing marketer person, if you're trying to just engage on Google+, that's a great recipe. Stacy, can you chime in with some thoughts on posting and hashtags generally?
Sure, absolutely. I would say my biggest recommendation is do not make them up. Do not make up a hashtag to be funny. And if you're going to, even though I'm telling you that it's silly and pointless and annoying, at least start each word within your hashtag with an uppercase letter so that you can read it. But it provides no value at all except to you if you think it's funny. So don't make them up because it's a waste. You can also research which hashtags are trending. Hashtagify Me is a great site where if I know I'm going to post about something that's health related, I can go in and type health, and it will pull up what's essentially like health will be in the middle, and it's a little solar system of bubbles that comes off of it showing what percentage of different social networks are talking about that and what hashtags they're using. So it may be that I think health is the word, but when I log on, it's FDA.
What's the name of that website?
It's hashtagify.me.
Hashtagify.me. Okay, great.
And it's free. You can pay for the pro version, but it's free, and I use it every day.
Great, and so that's, you put in that few extra seconds, and again, we're starting with, gee, I read this article I thought would be interesting, or relevant to my practice, or relevant to my colleagues or the public. I click on that, say something, I stick the link in, I do a little title, I do some content. Maybe you take that extra 30 seconds it takes to go to hashtagify.me and figure out what is related to that topic that people might be searching for. You stick a hashtag, a shift 3, and you write a word or multiple words all condensed as one word, and you do what Stacey was talking about with the camel case, where you do the first letter of each word is capitalized. So imagine you're writing in title case, and then you take out all the spaces. And I will admit to occasionally doing funny hashtags, or what I think is funny hashtags. Maybe everyone else doesn't. I do save that for Twitter, which is not as much, for me, a professional platform than I would for, say, Google Plus or LinkedIn or something like that. So that's great. Thanks for that. And then we have a couple other topics. One, I want to make sure we hit our ethical considerations, because I know in my own practice, in my firm, when I talk to people, whether they're active or they're not active on social media, often one reason they're not is because they have deep concerns about the ethics of engaging as an attorney in a public space. And I'm going to give you my 2 cents on that and then pass it off to the experts. What I would suggest is you treat social media like you're in a room full of colleagues. And if you were in a room full of colleagues, would you say something? Would you post something? you know, when you see stories about people who've ruined a career or you know, are posting inappropriate pictures or things like that, invariably, if you ask the question, would I do this in a room full of colleagues, the answer would be no. And you may look at different social media differently. Facebook may be more private, or you may treat that publicly and you may treat that professionally. But I would assume everything is public, and as long as you feel comfortable, you go into a room and say, you know, and maybe you would say, hey, look at my, you know, this picture of this crazy cat or this news story I heard. There's nothing inherently unprofessional about that if you don't do it every day, if you don't become the person who only posts about that. But as long as you keep that rule, you wouldn't walk into a room full of people and say, let me tell you this confidential information. Or, you know, people pass around that story about the young, bright attorney who had to miss a hearing, and she called up the court and said, gee, someone passed away, and then she gets on social media and posts a bunch of vacation pictures. Well, the problem with that isn't that she was on social media. The problem with that is that she's lying to a judge and got caught. And so, you know, when people tend to get scared about that, I just suggest as long as you comport yourself the same way online you would offline, you've got nothing to worry about unless you're going to be lying to judges. And most people, I would suggest, wouldn't do that. So let's pass this to Stacy about your thoughts on kind of the ethical do's and don'ts on Google Plus and social media generally.
So I guess common terminology would call this social media community management. And there is generally someone at a law firm, whether it's a person in-house or a lawyer themselves, if it's a small firm, or an outsourced agency that handles the community management of your social networks. If that person is not a lawyer or is not familiar with the ethics rules and how you are supposed to behave relative to solicitation and advertising, you can get yourself into big trouble at work like Google Plus in writing on public where anyone can see it. And so I always say to firms that are just starting out on these networks, give a little primer or a class and certainly write a social media protocol for your firm as far as the voice that you want to present yourself in and what to do if you get a media inquiry, what to do if you get an active client communication, because, you know, we're required in Texas to respond within a reasonable amount of time. If no one's monitoring your network, you're not going to do that and you can get grieved on. So you really have to not just set these up and walk away, you have to set them up and not only interact, but monitor them in a way that's appropriate considering the nature of our relationship with the public and with our existing clients.
That's a great point, and I just add, you know, you certainly might want to put disclaimers, block people from posting on the wall. If you're not going to be engaging, or if you're just going to use marketing folks, have that lesson with them, because marketing folks don't know unless they're lawyers. You know, Stacy is and is trial attorney, so has that insight. Guy, any thoughts on kind of the do's and don'ts ethically, or your top points? We just have a few minutes left. I want to get everyone in.
Yeah, let's kind of add on what Stacy said and what you said. I think handled it well. One is that, you know, going back to what you said, Bill, just assume everything is public and permanent online. And two is that, and this is more of a general social thing as it ties to ethics, but you know, really the social media, you shouldn't be running into these solicitation problems, because unless you're out there saying, call me for a free consultation, which is not really a good way to engage on social media anyway. You know, you want to be, it's a lot more of this natural kind of stuff, but you've got to be thinking about your clients, number one. And number two is think about your obligations. But it's a state-by-state thing. Different states have come down very differently. Tina, you can speak to Florida, which has a lot of stuff on just the web in general in terms of social and ethics and stuff like that. But I'd focus on, you know, having policies in place, making sure that it's clearly defined what's acceptable, but get away from this idea that social media is like a new advertising medium in terms of at least the engagement stuff, and you'll stay, you know, you'll avoid a lot of the problems. It's really the solicitation stuff, client confidentiality. Obviously, those things are things to be thinking about, but you know, again, a lot of it is that this is just a different medium. It's the message that matters, right? So if you're saying something that's unethical on social media, it's likely unethical if you were saying it face-to-face, if you're in a group of colleagues, if you're in the public. So, you know, again, I think if you think about it as public and permanent, keep your client's interests at the top of mind, and talk to your state bar folks make sure that you understand what your state says about it.
That's a great point. Tina, you want to chime in on Florida, which at least from my view is
I would
tough?
just add, I mean, you guys have given great information, and as I said before we started, it's a state-by-state thing, obviously. Every attorney knows that, and this is one reason why I think it's very difficult to have a non-lawyer regulate anything about your online presence without heavy oversight by you or some attorney, or there are quite a few attorneys now. I guess Stacy, I don't know about Guy, but who have switched to doing marketing, and those people I think are great, or someone who's very aware of the rules. But for me, I just, one thing is obviously being honest. In Florida, we have social media is governed by our ethics rules. And when you're posting, I'm mindful of it has to be objectively verifiable. So I just keep that in the basic rules that I know in my mind when I'm posting. And I mean, obviously, client confidentiality is a big thing. And so you would love to tell a story about the case you're involved in right now, but you just can't. I mean, it's just the bottom line. It's just off the table. You're not going to do it. So so I just, for me, since I do all of my own posting, it's pretty easy. I just, occasionally I'll reference the rules. I click over to the Florida Bar website, check out a rule I might be confused about, just real quick before I post. And it just becomes part of, it's in the background when you're writing, and like you said, I've seen attorneys posting, it's almost porn, basically like photos down their pages of like, really? Seriously? And I'm ethics or not, I mean, I just, that's just not my personality, so that works out nicely. But, it's like you said, something you would do in the room of colleagues. I think that's a good rule of thumb. Another thing I wanted to just throw in, I think someone was mentioning, and it made me think of the posts, there's a debate going back and forth, or there are just different opinions on this. And people may have their different levels of comfort, but personalizing some of your content, in other words, sharing content that has nothing to do with the law, to make yourself into a real person on Google+, what you did this weekend, or your dogs, or your children, or something about what you're into boating, or I'm into running, and so sometimes I post about that. But I think that is one reason why I've had some success on Google+, is that I do try to engage with people on a personal level, and I love those posts. I can think of what Jason Dunkel's 2 girls look like, and Brian Fishman, he has a daughter and a son, and what they look like, and then Stephan Futeral, I know, his wife and his daughter just went through a surgery, and what his wife is involved in, and I know those things because of those posts, and I feel more of a connection to those people because I've had little discussions with them about those things, which have, so then when they do share something about the law, I'm more interested because I feel like they are actually my friends.
That's a great point. Yeah. And I just want to suggest, that's a great point, and don't be afraid to be a human being on social media, because that's the social part of it, and I think everyone's kind of touched on that. I want to show, we're at time, so if we've got to lose anyone, that's understandable. We have a lot of people, and this is due to my newness, who have been dropping us questions that I thought would show up on the feed, and they don't. 2 things. One, if you've been watching this on the event page, go ahead afterwards and stick around and put some comments down, and other people will stick comments on, and you can engage with them and circle them and meet some people that way. You got to kind of do that after party thing. I want to show a couple of the questions we've seen from a few folks, and I know some of these folks, I'm glad they stopped by. This is John Lewis, and I'll just ask one person to kind of address it, and I don't know if this is showing or not. But the question is, how do you have time to do Google+, Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, LinkedIn, etc., with all of your media time? How do you find time to do that? And if we can we'll have one of these for each. So, Stacey, if you want to kind of, what would be your suggestion for an attorney suggesting how to decide whether or not to, or how to engage in these platforms?
Okay, so I would say that when you're talking about time management and social media, I would limit your networks in the beginning. And the 3 that I would say are absolutely mandatory are LinkedIn, where you need to not only have a personal profile, but a company page that is connected to your personal profile that talks about what your law firm is and what services you offer. You need to be on Google Plus for a variety of reasons, most of which being having your photo show up next to your content in search results gives you greater credibility with the searcher and thus a higher click-through rate. That's what studies are showing. So it's good to have the little picture there. But for time management, I would say Facebook is the third, because people use Facebook as a search engine now because they're on it so often, and so you want to have your firm have a company page on Facebook. So you limit it to those three. I do what I call content curation a few days a week. I feed all the blogs that are important to me into Feedly, and I categorize them. I have a maritime Feedly, a pharmaceutical Feedly, legal news Feedly, legal technology, you know, all these different chapters, and then I go in about 3 times a week and I sort of scan through all of these hundreds of articles, and I find which content I think is important to either bookmark to go back and read later, or read now and schedule through a tool like Hootsuite to share with my audience at a time that I know my particular account, whichever account I may be using at the time, gets the highest percentage of engagement. So there's a lot of strategy involved with it, meaning that I'll schedule to share something on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Google Plus for next Monday today.
Okay, great. And I'm going to post a link to Feedly. It's a service that lets you kind of read, and there's also Buffer to repost. And I think it's great to try to limit your time for now, and don't try to do everything at the beginning. There's a couple questions about communities. What I would suggest, I think Tina spoke to this very wisely, she runs some great communities, is don't try to start a community right now. If you're watching this as a beginner, just participate, learn. You'll know how to best run a community when you've joined a community that does it well and when you've joined a community that doesn't do it well. And maybe we'll try to do a follow-up show on specific to communities, so don't think I'm ignoring you. And then there's a question on do you have suggestions for engaging the public instead of just engaging other lawyers? And this is Amy Long, and someday I'll figure out how to show these on the screen. Guy, can you touch on for a second? We've talked about lawyer communities and things like that, of how someone starting out might consider engaging with public, I guess, potential clients and just the public generally.
Sure. So, you know, just kind of like even in the real world, I think it's about, we talked about this a little bit, showing your personality, sharing things that you're interested in. That's how you're going to start to gravitate to people who are also interested in those things. So I think being authentic, when you find something that you think is interesting, add some commentary to it and share it publicly. You'll be surprised if people start to find that, because they're looking for things that might be similar to that. Again, if you're from an ethics standpoint, you've got to be, when you share things publicly, really either way, keep that in mind, that you don't want to be violating rules. But I think the key is just show some personality, be conversational, and go comment. So, if you see something that you like somewhere else, it doesn't have to just be that you're posting things. Go comment on somebody else's post and say, hey, I appreciate that, such and such happened to me, share a funny story. Being a human being, I think that's what we're starting to learn, is these are just tools to be able to give us access to more people, but let your personality show through. Great.
And then a question here, and I'll try to handle this by saying I don't know, but give you some advice. The question is, and this is John Dobagi, when I delete a post, is it gone from everyone's pages or just mine? What if it is reposted before delete? I'll tell you, if you delete it, if you delete, or you can edit a post, that's another option. You go up to the upper right hand corner, there'll be a little caret widget that you can hard to see, but if you click on that, you can have a drop down that includes edit, so sometimes that helps, although the earlier version may be available. When you delete it, it's going to be gone from everybody, but that doesn't mean it's gone. I don't know what happens if they've reshared it themselves. That original content may still be there in their reshare, your comments, although the link may not work, etc. So I would just kind of chime in on what everyone else has been saying, that if you put something online, especially on social media, just assume it's out there. It's not the end of the world. It's not, if you post regular content, no one's going to hold up in court that one time you posted something that was, a cat picture or something. As long as you're being ethical, you're going to be fine. And then someone suggested, and to whoever can answer this, someone asked, they have a great question. I often +1 posts, which is great, starting that engagement, that they find interesting, but then can't find what they've +1. So they want to go back and reference information they thought was interesting, which is a great use of social media. So I've resorted to sharing those items I'm interested to myself, which is an interesting. So they're sharing instead of publicly, they're typing in their own name. Any suggestions on a more efficient way to find +1 posts? And that's Ralph Soma. So thanks for the question, Ralph. Does anyone want to take a crack at how you can kind of preserve some of these things you find really interesting on Google+?
So
well,
I think go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. No, I'm good. No, go ahead.
Tina.
Well, I was just going to say.
Okay, I'm going to call on Tina. Tina.
Sorry. Well, I'll just say real quick. We can both give our answer. I share them into a private community. And so, I have Tina's private posts, which is just, I'm the only member, and that's how I do it. But I've seen discussions about, they need like a way of gold starring like you do in Gmail and stuff like that, and hopefully someday they'll get to that point. But yeah, right now you've got to kind of make do with the tools they have. So, Guy, how do you do that?
That's a really good way to do it. One other thing you can do is, if you go to your actual profile, there is a +1s tab, and you can decide whether or not you want that to be public or not through your Google Plus settings. But they actually, right on your profile, it's between. Well, for me, it's between YouTube and reviews. But it basically will show everything you +1.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Well, I think we're going to wrap up. Let me make sure we covered everything. I think we did. I want to thank my guests for being on. That was terrific. We had a great panel. And just as an example, I started on Google Plus not that long ago. I thought the same thing a lot of people think, which is, what's Google Plus? Why do that? I found it very engaging. To me, it's everything LinkedIn should have been, but isn't. And I've met people like Ian, Stacy, and Tracy. Tina, sorry, and engage with them and learn with them to the point where I can send an invitation to show up on this show, and they're willing to do it. So that's great. If you guys, and I'm invisible, I apologize for that. But thank you guys for coming in. Thanks for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed the show.
Thank you. You did a great job.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.